Welcome to the Pink Pasta Podcast. Spooky stories, questionable morals, and a demon with a flair for drama. That's me. Relax. It's only a podcast. What's the worst that could happen? Now, this story is a little different. It's not just some random Reddit story that I chose to read today. It actually comes to us from KuroTheFox. So without further ado, Hoarder. I was on the way to a hoarder house that needed cleaning up. Unfortunately, I was going to have to start working on it alone, as my usual partner had to call out and the higher-ups couldn't find someone to take their place. As I was going to be the first one on the scene, my job was to simply assess the property and note down what all should be done and maybe do a little cleaning up if there's time to spare. Now, usually the properties we handled were small, one-story homes in the middle of trashy neighborhoods. However, this one was a bit out of the ordinary. As I drove into the neighborhood, I immediately noticed that nearly all of the houses were identical, as the only thing differentiating between them was the numbers on the front doors. They were fairly large, 3-story homes built with earthly colored bricks and about a dozen windows plastered about. They each had a small garden patch in the front as well, but again, nearly all of them had the same plants. Honestly, I couldn't help but think that whoever designed the properties had taken design cues from a child's drawing of a house. At any rate, the GPS had finally alerted me that I had arrived, and I pulled into the driveway. The outside of the home looked fairly normal, aside from the plants in the garden patch, appearing to be parched and unkept. I opened the back of my truck and gathered my gear before putting on my protective suit. I was told the woman that lived there had taken her own life with a shotgun and hadn't been found until weeks later. So, putting on my suit was a must, despite how little it actually protected me from the stench I had to endure in my line of work. Regardless, I zipped up the suit, did a final check on everything, grabbed my gear, and headed towards the front door. Using the key I was given, I gently opened the door and was greeted by a sight I was fairly used to by now. Piles and piles of trash were stacked up several feet high with just a small path through it carved out. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. I took small, unstable steps forward, crunching and crushing trash as I made my way through the eerily quiet home. I was almost immediately shrouded in darkness, no thanks to the piles of garbage that had presumably blocked the windows. To remedy this, I turned on my small handy flashlight. I cursed under my breath after realizing how pitiful the output was, no thanks to the budget cuts our department had been under. But it was better than nothing. I had entered what I assumed was the living room, though it was next to impossible to discern one part of the home from the other. Wine bottles, beer cans, and who knows what else. Now all just one homogeneous mass of decayed, molded, rotten waste. And there was no way to avoid it. I reached a branching path and arbitrarily picked a direction, jotting down a quick note as I did. My mind wandering, I began to observe my surroundings a bit more thoroughly, inadvertently shining my flashlight towards a brightly colored slip of paper amongst the waste. An eviction notice, not terribly surprising given the state of the home. Turning away from the paper, I realized I had made it to a set of carpeted stairs. I was slightly confused, but I brushed the feeling away, assuming my lack of proper sleep was getting the better of me. Steeling myself, I headed up the steep, creaky, dirt-coated stairs. Thankfully, the staircase was seemingly fairly devoid of trash. However, that hardly made traversing it any easier. Despite being non-religious, I hoped and prayed that each step I took was a safe one. The dilapidated stairs, as well as my anxiety, became worse and worse with each step I took. I cursed under my breath, over and over, in a weak attempt to motivate myself to keep going. Eventually, I reached what I assumed was the second floor. I had to assume so because it was entirely blocked off with trash and there was no way I was going to make a path into it alone. So instead, I simply made a note about it. After looking up from my note, I saw another note sticking out from the pile. Feeling inexplicably curious, I carefully extracted it and shined my flashlight on it. Divorce papers, dated about 6 years ago. Once again, I wasn't surprised. I took a deep breath before continuing up the stairs to the 3rd floor. As I slowly crept up the moldy stairs, I was thankful to have my crappy flashlight by my side, as the surroundings would have been pitch black without it. Eventually, I made it to the top of the stairs where the stench of death was at its worst. I was met with what appeared to be an impossibly long hallway that was, to no one's surprise, littered with piles of waste, leaving just a small crevice to travel through. I then wrote a note and cursed under my breath. Again. I put my right foot forward and... crunch. Startled, I took a step back and immediately shined my light towards the sound. It was a picture frame, now broken by my steel-toed boot. I gingerly lifted it up to inspect it. Inside the frame was a photo of what appeared to be a loving, happy family. A mother, a father, and a son, all smiling at a playground. A bit cliché, but wholesome nonetheless. I silently apologized to the frame before gently placing it back down on the dirty floor. I was beginning to feel on edge, which wasn't usual for me given I had surveyed other houses in a similar state dozens of times. I should really consider a different career, I mumbled to myself. Nevertheless, I pushed forward for an uncomfortably long time. At some point, the way forward was blocked off by yet another wall of junk. I jotted down another note. I then turned around expecting to see the way back, and yet, instead I was met with another impassable wall of garbage. I quickly turned again, assuming my sleep deprivation was playing tricks on me again, just to see another wall of trash. Panic setting in, I turned completely around one last time and found a dark wooden door. With seemingly nowhere else to go, I reached forward with a trembling hand and slowly turned the doorknob before pushing forward. I pushed away a pile of beer cans with the door and carefully stepped inside, inadvertently crushing more cans as I did. I shined my flashlight straight ahead, and the light bounced off a mirror and back into my eyes. I flinched, quickly moving the light up to the ceiling to shower the room in it. It was then I realized I had arrived to the scene of the incident. It was a bathroom that had just enough space for the basic necessities, and the air was thick and still. The sound of a slow but steady drip of water echoed in the small room. Drip, drip, drip. I turned to my right to see the blood-stained bathtub. It appeared as though the woman was laying down in the tub when it happened, as there was a dark outline where her body had been. Bullet shrapnel and black-dried blood had painted the back wall, with broken tiling littering the inside of the tub. I took a deep breath. Bang! In an instant, the door had closed behind me, trapping me inside. I immediately dashed towards the door and attempted to open it, to no avail. I banged on the door and screamed for help uselessly. Hearing a shotgun being racked, I swiftly turned back to the tub to find a woman laying inside it, cradling the shotgun, almost like a baby. He took him away from me. My boy, she sobbed with slurred words. I didn't mean to hurt him. She then let her mouth hang open and gently placed the barrel of the gun between her crusted lips. I reached towards her and cried out in an attempt to stop her. Bang! The explosive sound was deafening and the flash from the barrel was blinding. After a few seconds of recovery, I shined my light on her limp corpse to bear witness to the gruesome scene before me. Brain matter, bone fragments, and blood had haphazardly splattered all over the shower and tub. I held my breath, unable to tear my vision away. Drip, drip, drip. What was just minutes in reality felt like hours as I remained as still as a statue. Is that you, John? A voice whispered directly in my ear. I didn't dare move a muscle. Where did you take him? I didn't have an answer for the disembodied voice, so I remained silent, my heart pounding out of my chest and my body shaking despite my futile efforts. You bastard. A chill ran up my spine. Suddenly, the corpse in the tub sat upwards and turned towards me. Give him back! She let out a blood-curdling scream and started rushing towards me. In an instant, I dropped my flashlight and made an attempt at the bathroom door again. Luckily, it gave way, allowing me to escape. Panicked and with adrenaline pumping through my veins, I forced my way through a trashy crevice. I could hear the woman catching up behind me quickly, screaming incessantly all the while. Get back here and face me like a man, coward! I continued to push my way through the garbage with seemingly no end in sight. You know our son had to be punished for what he did. Beer cans of all kinds toppled on top of me as I pressed on, drenching my protective suit in foul liquid. I'm better now. I'm not drinking that poison anymore, darling. The voice had turned into a pleasing tone. However, the veracity of the footsteps behind me was not letting up in the slightest. I won't hurt him anymore, just please. Give me another chance. The voice sobbed and cried softly at first, but it quickly became more and more intense as time passed. I was beginning to exhaust myself out when, finally, I had broken through the mess and was at the top of the staircase. I could see the faintest sign of sunlight at the very bottom, and yet, the staircase appeared to go on forever. Hearing the footsteps get closer, I threw all caution out of the window and descended the stairs as quickly as I could. My steps were thunderous, ferociously shaking the entire staircase with each step. It didn't take long for the entity behind me to follow suit. Hey, you dropped this! Almost immediately as those words were spat at me, I felt a sharp, burning pain in my lower back, and I cried out. Without stopping my descent, I pulled out the object from my back and tossed it aside, assuming it was a piece of the frame I broke earlier. Fighting through the pain, I continued to descend. I had just made it to the second story when my foot crashed through the rotted floor, causing the rest of my body to barrel forwards. I tumbled down the stairs chaotically and quickly. I tried to stop myself several times, but it was all for naught as I was practically blind. I could hear maniacal cackling as I fell further and further down the stairs. Eventually, I stopped. Searing pain was spreading all throughout my body, but I was forced to ignore it and push myself up and forward once again. However, what was once a maze of refuse had now become a clean and spotless living room. The sun was shining through the windows, birds were chirping outside, and all was calm. A mother, father, and son were all together in the middle of the room, sitting on the floor. They were playing with all kinds of toys with the boy, smiles plastered across all of their faces. It all seemed perfect, and yet it also felt off. There you are! I whipped my head back to see the woman's corpse still coming for me. I immediately turned back to find myself back in a labyrinth of garbage. Once again, I pushed forward through the trash despite my body begging me to stop moving. The entity behind me continued to scream profanities and cackle at me, but I didn't dare look back or falter. I had to make it out. Luckily, in a matter of minutes, I did just that, practically tumbling out of the damned house. I scurried to my feet once again and hurriedly limped to the van. Jumping inside, I shakily inserted the key into the ignition, turned it on, and reversed out of the driveway as quickly as I could. Before driving away, I looked up at the house one last time. The boy I saw before was now standing on the third-story window, staring down at me, with tears pouring down his cheeks, desperately banging the glass with his fists. I slammed my possibly broken foot down on the gas pedal and never looked back. This was the Pink Pasta Podcast. I'm your host, Pink, the demon you willingly invited into your ears. Thanks for listening. Come back next time.